Good evening and welcome, everyone. I'm calling the September 8th City Council meeting to order. This is a remote meeting this evening. So before we move on to tonight's agenda, I'd like to acknowledge our remote meeting format. On March 6th, I issued an emergency proclamation declaring a civil emergency in the city due to the COVID-19 outbreak. On the 24th of March, the governor issued Proclamation 20-28, prohibiting meetings that fall under the Open Public Meetings Act, such as our city council meetings, from being conducted in person. This prohibition has been extended through October 1st. Tonight's meeting will be held entirely remotely. The meeting will be recorded, streamed live, and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting or to make comments. And for those members of the public on the call, welcome, Connie. For those of you who submitted the online form to make comments, your name will be called under the audience comment portion of the meeting. If there is anyone on the call who did not sign up, and I see some more people have shown up, but would like to make comments tonight, please press *3 on your phone and we will add you to the speakers list. At this point, we'll take a moment to do our roll call of council members in attendance. So please say here when I call your name. Councilmember DeMichelle.
Here.
Councilmember Goodman.
Here.
Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Council President Hunt.
Here.
Councilmember Martz.
Here.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Here.
And Councilmember Walsh.
Here.
All 7 council members here this evening. We also have some city staff with us tonight, including City Administrator Wally Bobkowitz, Deputy City Administrator Andrea Schneider, City Transportation Planner Stephen Padua, and City Attorney Jim Haney, Deputy City Clerk Tisha Geiser. There may also be some other city staff in attendance. So for our meeting this evening, I'd like to reiterate a few guidelines. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And if you are also streaming the live video feed, please turn the sound off as there is a delay. For council members, please continue to use the chat to indicate when you would wish to speak, and please identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion, second a motion, or participate in debate. So the next item on the agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance, and if I could get you all to mute your microphones, I welcome you to join in with me on the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is audience comment, and I know we have at least one person signed up. City Clerk, who is our first guest tonight?
Our first guest tonight is David Kapler. Dave, I will unmute you now. Hold on just a moment here.
While you're doing that, I will make I realize I did not go through the guidelines. So I'll go through the guidelines before we bring Mr. Kapler on. Please make sure to direct your comments to the whole council and not individuals. And while this is not a question and answer session, we will contact you to follow up if needed. When recognized, please unmute your microphone. *6 may be an option for that on your phone, and state your name, address, and relationship to the city. Speak clearly and pause frequently. Limit your comments to 5 minutes and remute your microphone when done. If you do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or if your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will need to proceed and you are encouraged to rejoin the meeting if able. Again, for those who have joined us tonight and would like to speak but did not sign up in advance, please press *3 on your phone. We'll call the first 6 digits of your phone number when it's your turn to make comments. Personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior will not be permitted. And if someone is out of order, I will ask them to stop and mute their microphone. If they do not comply, I may direct staff to mute their microphone. And if the disruption continues, the meeting order cannot be restored, I may direct the staff to remove you from the call. Citizen comments, written and verbal, are an important aspect of the public process, and the city takes comments seriously. We thank you for taking the time to come and address us tonight. Now we can start with Mr. Kapler.
Hello, is this working out right?
It sounds great, Dave.
Great, this is my first time to call into a city council meeting, so thank you. Two items, the Tibbetts Crossing. The issue here is that the plat is fine and they're doing good work on the trail system there. I just wanted to call attention to the city to the trail that's been in the works slowly for almost 40 years. There were two trails proposed almost 40 years ago. One was the Lake Sammamish Trail, East Lake Sammamish Trail, which had the advantage of a railroad grade. The other one was the Cedar River Lake Sammamish Trail. And little pieces of this latter trail, the Lake Sammamish Cedar River Trail, have been acquired. We have a little bit more of it being acquired through this plat. But I'd like the city to think about that a little more aggressively, perhaps, and see if we can get some connections there. We're not going to get to the Cedar River very soon, but if we can get the central area in Issaquah, or even from Talus, and connect to the Squak Mountain, the Great Talus open space, and then all of the county and state open space on Talus, on Squak Mountain. So let's think a little bit more about those connections there. They'd be a great service to our population, especially future population in the central Issaquah planning area. Want to compliment the city on their work so far on the Newport slide. Kind of interesting. You got the federal money, state involved, and you have two different jurisdictions covering the ground that slide is on, with part of it being an unincorporated King County with the county, and part of it being on incorporated city, Issaquah. And looks like everybody's working together. I think we have an opportunity to reroute some trails, come up with some new trails, and do some better things in that general area as we pursue this solving the slide problem. I just see it as a great step to get into some other needed improvements in that area that we are certainly able to pull off. Issaquah does great work on the trail and park issues, and King County is a great partner as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I just wanted to let you know your correspondence with graphics was also received by council this afternoon by email. Thank you very much for that. City Clerk, next up on our list.
Next, we have Connie Marsh, and I have unmuted you, Connie. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
So, yeah, you know, I'm going to bounce off Dave. Oh, Connie Marsh, I live on Squak Mountain. I am going to bounce off Dave just for a minute about the Tibbetts Trail thing. That went to River and Streams Board, and there were comments made, and changes were made in order to accommodate River and Streams Board's comments. For example, the trail ends up in the outer part of the buffer, which I personally think is just code. But one thing that is not clear to me for that is who is responsible for maintaining the trail. This was another conversation at the board. Who's responsible for the replanting and the maintenance of all of this, and who's funding it if it's a public responsibility? And maybe it's in the fine print there. I must admit I didn't read all of the fine print. So most of my weekend has been about systems, right? Because interestingly, this master mobility plan and the environmental board, to me, are about systems. We have these overlays in our town where we are looking at the environment and we're looking at transportation, and they basically have fingers all through town. And what we don't have is we don't have elegant and functioning systems that provide the interconnection between public and private and community and staff to make sure that all of the voices are heard and that we get a quality product in the end. So when I read the update on the master mobility plan, you know, it's like the system is the same. I sent an email and I got the email back saying, well, the system is the same, basically, has been. We have these new, maybe you'd call them priorities, that things are going to funnel through, and that might change the standards, but it's not necessarily going to change the system by which transportation projects flow through public and private. So without that change, we're going to end up with the same ungainly process that we had along Newport Way. And Newport Way has been a total pain for people who've lived there for years and years now, and an ungainly mess between public and private. And so we all know that the city has a list of all of the people who are interested in Newport Way, yet when a project comes up, they aren't sent an email asking them what they think or getting input on that in advance for scoping. And it seems like the city is continuing a system that leaves the community out of the process. And it puzzles me because the council talks about the community a lot and engaging the community. And so why don't we have a system that works? And this is for the environment, this is for transportation, this is for parks, this is for a broad spectrum of our issues. And so I guess that to me is the nut to crack, because if we can crack that nut, we can solve the problems that we have with each of those topics of conversation. So I don't know if that rings a bell with any of your brains, but I think that's our basic problem there, and we won't make progress until we solve it. So anyway, thank you. Enjoy the smokiness, and I will see you and talk to you all soon. Bye.
Thank you, Connie. Tisha, do we have anyone else signed up to speak this evening?
No one else has signed to speak, and I don't see any other members of the public on the line at this time.
Okay, thank you. So both of our speakers this evening were talking about a bit about Newport and some trail work down at Tibbetts Crossing, but also about the systems and processes we use to engage the public in the community work that we do. Thank you both for coming in this evening. As a reminder, written comments could always be submitted to your city council at any time at citycouncil@issaquah.gov. And in addition, comments received by email on any of tonight's agenda topics will be acknowledged by the council president under the relevant agenda item. So the next item of business is committee regional reports, and we will start with Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. I have no report at this time.
Thank you. Councilmember DiMichele.
There we go. This is Councilmember DiMichele. I have 3 reports tonight. The first one is I met with the Healthier Here Board of Governors on August 6th and September the 3rd. There are many projects happening, but for the sake of time, I'm going to highlight only one of those, the Community Information Exchanges. This is a project which was postponed due to COVID, but is now moving forward. The Community Information Exchanges, or CIEs, seek to de-silo physical and mental health care and provide safe and secure platforms so physicians and counselors can share information. And this project has the potential to revolutionize medical and mental health service delivery. Our region is one of only 2 pilot programs in the United States which is authorized by the federal government. And Healthier Here is in the process of forming a CIE community advisory group. And because of the COVID situation, they are also applying for a 1-year extension, which they think is probably very favorably going to happen. So this is a very important factor of moving forward on this particular project. So very happy to be able to announce that. The next meeting of Healthier Here is scheduled for October 1st. Then I met with the Eastside Transportation Program and the Combined Regional Transportation Groups on August 7th. And as of that date, Metro had returned to 62% of its usual service from a low of 20% after the governor's proclamation. Metro expects to be back to 85% of regular service the 3rd week of September when there is a scheduled service change. The barriers to full restoration of service include social distancing requirements, a massive loss of revenue since the shutdown, and the impacts of telecommuting. And because Issaquah is one of the areas where service has been most impacted due to increased telecommuting, I was heartened to hear that Metro has been conducting extensive discussions with area employers to gauge how many employees will be returning to work sites when we enter phase 3. They are also trying to gauge the flow of riders during the work week and how that might impact the number of buses and Metro drivers needed each day. It's a huge logistics puzzle that they're working on. There's some other big news from Metro, and that is that there is a new interim general manager. Terry White started with Metro nearly 30 years ago as a dispatcher and has been second in command at the agency for the past 4 years. And Mr. White is assuming his new position following the resignation of Rob Gannon, who is moving to his hometown of Missoula, Montana, to lead the transit agency there. And the next meeting of ETP is, and the combined transportation groups is on September 15th. And then finally, I met with Eastside Human Services Forum on August 26th in a joint meeting with the Association of Eastside Agencies for a community meeting focused on human services legislative priorities. 82 agency representatives attended, and I will continue to work with the Eastside Human Services Forum Legislative Committee to refine Eastside Human Services goals before the beginning of the legislative session. And our next meeting of the Eastside Human Services Forum Board of Directors is September 17th. And that completes my reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeMichelle. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Walsh. The last Friday in August, I met with the Chamber of Commerce to brief them on the budget, primarily what our baseline budget looked like going into this, let them know about the schedule, and brief them on a few of the bills coming up, including, well, at the time it was a bill, Master Mobility Plan, and some of the other things that might be interesting to businesses. And so I think they're very interested in seeing our budget. They were very appreciative that we have been fiscally responsible, as they said, and that we have a good general fund. So they were very, very much praising us for that. Going forward, I will be attending the Thursday, the business summit of several chambers, seeing what I can hear about that. And then the Puget Sound Regional Council Economic Development District Board meets every 3 months. And so the next meeting of that is supposed to be October 7th, and we have not received an agenda yet. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goodman here. The Lodging Tax Advisory Committee met on August 12th, and the committee unanimously approved the following from its budget. $100,000 for direct business support, $50,000 of that to be requested in applications now, and I'll talk about that in a moment, and then $50,000 for next March. $125,000 for promotion and visitor attraction services for 2021, which would not be limited to Visit Issaquah, and $125,000 to be retained in the fund balance for 2022 and beyond. On September 1st, the committee met again, and we provided feedback on the applications and review process regarding the direct business support, and the committee will review the applications for recommendation to the full council in early October. The applications are posted, the announcement for applications is posted on the city's website, and the deadline for those is October 5th. The Eastside Fire and Rescue Board of Directors will meet this Thursday at 4 p.m. at headquarters, and the topical items on the agenda are budget and the new nonprofit formation proposal that we will continue to talk about. It's my understanding also that Chief Clark will be coming to a council meeting toward the end of the month to talk about the proposed budget for next year. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Martz. Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee will be meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. in cyberspace. On the agenda is the 2021 SCA legislative agenda. As potential future action, I'll be coming back to talk to council about that. There'll be a general discussion on affordable housing and a general discussion on the Vision 2050 plan update. Additionally, the Puget Sound Regional Council Growth Management Policy Board will be meeting Thursday, September 17th from 10 a.m. until noon, also in cyberspace, and I do not have an agenda for that yet. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Martz. Deputy Council President Ray.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. This is Chris Ray. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I have two reports this evening. The first one is regarding the Kokanee Interlocal Agreement Management Committee. Kokanee are a very endangered type of local salmon. And at this management committee meeting, we reviewed the work plan for 2021 and the budget and the cost share. And the action that we took was to approve the budget and the cost share. But then we also chose a option to not include a inflationary increase for 2021. And so Issaquah's cost share is $30,945 for 2021. And so that will not include a inflationary increase. And this is in line with what we've been requesting other partners consider given the city's financial situation and given the current economy. So that work will continue for the Kokanee work group, and they have a lot of exciting studies and information about the work that they're doing, but it's all about conservation of Kokanee in the next few years. And then and that committee does not have a future planned meeting. My second report is for the Housing Stability Ad Hoc, which is a ad hoc committee formed of 3 council members to look more at the eviction, local defense against eviction, as well as other potential housing stability. And between August 25th and today, the ad hoc committee focused on doing outreach and researching more mediation or the meet and confer process and how that might be included into a local defense against eviction. On September 2nd, the ad hoc committee met with the administration and met with the city attorney, Jim Haney. And then following that, we provided our thoughts on we annotated a version of the meeting minutes from the August 25th meeting to fill in some of our comments on different things that were not completely fleshed out during the August 25th meeting. So for instance, we considered, and it seems that council was interested in adding whereas clauses to the wording to give more context about both the effects on tenants and landlords. And so we provided some of that wording and additional recommendations for drafting. And this will all come back to council at the next study session on September 15th. In addition to this, we did outreach to a number of individuals and housing organizations to get feedback on the mediation idea. That includes the Rental Housing Association of Washington, Arch, Imagine Housing, and then also multiple individuals at the Eastside Legal Assistance Program, the executive director as well as a member of their board. And further, we've received new information from the city's lobbyist, Shelley Helder, regarding a process that will be a meet and confer process for multiple counties. And so I forwarded that to the full council. And generally, to summarize those conversations, generally the individuals we spoke with did not have a concern about including something like mediation, although a number of them stressed that they use other things like negotiation and less formal than mediation, and that should be an option as well. And then our recommendation from that is that the ordinance should be compliant with the meet and confer process, but should include that mediation. And this concludes the work of the ad hoc committee, the Housing Stability Ad hoc Committee. We were tasked with returning to the full council on or before September 9th, 2020. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. The next thing on the agenda this evening is the mayor's report. First up, there will not be an executive session this evening. And September is a month where we usually have a proclamation or two, so I have several that I will be reading into the record this evening. The first one is for National Recovery Month. Whereas behavioral health is an essential part of health and one's overall wellness, and whereas prevention of mental and/or substance use disorders works, treatment is effective, and people's recovery is possible, and whereas recovery is a process, and that people recover in our local area and around the nation, and whereas we must encourage relatives and friends of people with mental and/or substance use disorders to implement preventative measures, recognize the signs of a problem, and guide those in need to appropriate treatment and recovery support services. I call upon community members to join me in observing this month, the month of September 2020, with appropriate programs, activities, and ceremonies supporting this year's Recovery Month. This is also Suicide Prevention Month, whereas suicidal thoughts can affect anyone, regardless of age, gender, race, orientation, income level, religion, or background. And whereas, according to the CDC, the age-adjusted suicide rate in the U.S. increased by 33% from 1999 through 2017, and 47,173 people died by suicide in 2019. And whereas mental health is as important as physical health, and many people are experiencing increased anxiety and depression during the coronavirus epidemic, and whereas every member of our community should understand that throughout life's struggles, we all need the occasional reminder that we are all silently fighting our own battles. I urge all community members to join me in raising awareness to prevent suicide in our community. The fourth is Child Cancer Awareness Month, which is also September. Whereas pediatric cancer is the leading cause of death by disease in children, and whereas 1 in 285 children in the United States will be diagnosed by their 20th birthday, and whereas 80% of childhood cancer cases are diagnosed only after the disease has metastasized and spread to other parts of the body, and whereas 2/3 of childhood cancer patients will have long-lasting chronic conditions as a result of the treatment they go through, and whereas there has been a 24% increase in pediatric cancer cases over the last 40 years, equal to 43 children per day, or 15,780 children a year diagnosed with cancer in the United States. I encourage all community members to join in the activities that will increase awareness and prevent childhood cancer. And Welcoming Week also occurs in September, from September 18th to 27th. And whereas the east side cities of Bellevue, Issaquah, Kirkland, Redmond, and Sammamish have jointly celebrated East Side Welcoming Week for the past 4 years, and whereas these cities recognize the importance of ensuring that all residents feel safe, secure, and welcome, and whereas East King County is one of the most racially and ethnically diverse regions in Washington state, and whereas realizing our vision for a welcoming community requires actively addressing the lived experiences of those in our community who do not feel welcome, safe, valued, or included. And whereas recent events have highlighted the historic and current impacts of individual, institutional, and systemic racism that result in harmful disparities in education, employment, income, housing, criminal justice, and quality of life, as well as a sense of belonging. And whereas our community, like others across the nation, has structures, systems, and policies that contribute to injustice, racial inequality, and discriminatory treatment against residents who were born in another country, are Black, Indigenous, other people of color, LGBTQ, and other identities. And whereas to capitalize on diversity as an asset, our community must strive to create a culture and policies that ensure that everyone can belong and thrive by addressing disparities, countering hate, understanding history, and helping neighbors come together. The City of Issaquah is partnering with a number of local organizations to celebrate Welcoming Week from September 12th to 20th. Activities include community photo submissions, cultural panels, a family story stroll, and virtual dance and music watch party. For details, go to issaquahwa.gov/welcoming week. I invite the community to engage in opportunities during Eastside Welcoming Week and beyond to learn, to connect across differences, to take joint action to achieve a welcoming, equitable, and inclusive community, and reaffirm their commitment to continue to examine and adopt programs, policies, and practices that improve our efforts towards achieving equity for all now and in the future. That is the last proclamation for this evening. I do want to just add a little note of explanation that many of our partner organizations request these proclamations just to make sure that the council and the community is aware of these important activities that are going on, the days or weeks that they are celebrated, or the months that they are recognized. So thank you for that. The last item I had this evening is on the Environmental Board, and I want to provide a brief update on its formation following the August 13th Planning Policy Commission meeting. The administration received several comments and suggestions from both commissioners and members of the public for further details on the formation of the board. The commission moved to continue discussion to allow time for revisions and additional information to be presented at a later meeting. The administration is working to integrate comments received from the City Council, Planning Policy Commission, and the public, including revisions to the ordinance objective and several of the duties and responsibilities. We are also working on a draft environmental checklist and a process for community review of projects. There will be a new public hearing on the creation of the board at the Planning Policy Commission meeting on September 24th, and then the ordinance will come to council for action on October 5th. There is a lot of opportunity for this board to help shape the policies, plans, and regulations that guide the city's work and its impact on our climate, environment, and future. The city has prioritized taking time to work with the community, including residents, commissions, and council, to create a board that will help ensure the protection of our environment here in Issaquah. And that concludes the mayor's report. The next item on our agenda this evening is informational updates. ID 0750 Mobility Master Plan, and this item was last before council at the July 28th council study session. And I'd like to ask Senior Transportation Planner Stephen Padua to present this item. Stephen.
Stephen, this is Tisha. I'm not able to hear you. Is anyone else having that issue?
Yep, same issue.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
No, we can't hear you now.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. Good evening. The purpose of tonight's update is to provide a brief summary of the Mobility Master Plan final draft. Next slide, please. And to cover what implementation is expected to look like next year when we potentially move to incorporate the master plan into the capital improvement plan. Next slide, please. Just as a quick reminder, the master plan was originally discussed back in 2015 as part of the City Council goals, which was resulted in adding the task to the comprehensive plan. City Council then budgeted for the master plan and formalized the Transportation Advisory Board with the intention of using this board to support the development and the implementation of the master plan. The city then recruited for the board, hired additional staff, and contracted with a professional planning consultant to help us get to where we're at today. As part of the consent agenda for tonight's meeting, the administration is proposing to add the Mobility Master Plan to the Comprehensive Plan docket so that the master plan can be fully adopted as the transportation element at the end of this year. Prior to tonight's meeting, the City Council last discussed the master plan at the July 28th study session, where staff received several comments and edits. Next slide, please. The plan that was provided for tonight's meeting is a revised version that incorporates feedback from the City Council, the Transportation Advisory Board, and staff since the plan draft was publicly released in July. I'm not going to go through all the edits, but I'll highlight the major changes that were made since then. A full list of the revisions can be found in the attachment T for tonight's update. One of the bigger revisions staff completed was a reworked section for climate change to identify transportation's larger role in meeting our goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The project team also added language related to the coordination with the school district. We also stated more on the realities of the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on the transportation system and how it is changing and will change in the near future. The project team also reviewed the financial component for additional edits and restructured the plan to improve readability and clarity on what we're trying to achieve. I'll speak to this a little bit later, but the administration plans to complete a more substantial financial assessment for transportation as part of next year's capital improvement plan. Next slide, please. Looking at next year, we'll be taking all the initial steps to implement the master plan and build it into the city systems. First half of 2021, we'll be conducting a special process to incorporate the master plan into the capital improvement plan, which will start in January, which is early compared to previous sessions. And we'll be starting those discussions with the Transportation Advisory Board on discussion of the CIP projects. The administration will return to City Council in early 2021 to initiate discussions on the CIP, but also to summarize discussions with the Transportation Advisory Board. The other components of the implementation include updates to related policies, engineering standards, but also exploration of small projects that help support the near-term implementation of the master plan. Next slide, please. That I hope to explain how the master plan will get incorporated into the CIP process. I first want to walk through the previous process in 2019. As many of you know, this typically starts by carrying over the previous year's transportation improvement plan, which includes committed projects that have already started or include significant city or external investments. It also includes other near-term projects that haven't started yet or are projected to start in the 6-year planning timeframe. The CIP also includes future projects that have been identified to be significant for a future system or ultimately are unfunded with no specific timeframe for implementation. Staff then conducts an evaluation, which typically includes updates to specific project budgets, addition of new funding opportunities, balancing of project schedules with staff capacity, and then feedback from City Council. Following the evaluation, the proposal is made to City Council, and then it is after adoption is included as part of the city budget process. This process typically starts around March and ends around June or July. Next slide, please. For next year, there's a lot to take on, so we're actually starting discussions with the advisory board in January. Two things are going to be different from the previous CIP processes. Instead of taking all the previous year's TIP, we're only taking the committed projects that have investments that we need to stay committed to. We'll remove the near-term projects that haven't started yet and remove the future funded projects with no implementation timelines. And we're adding the layer of the master plan's prioritized project list for staff evaluation. It's important to note that in the master plan's project list is also the list of the projects that are in the TIP, but with an extra layer of prioritization. So in the staff evaluation of the projects, we'll identify all the near-term, mid-term, and long-term projects and include in the project justifications how well each of the projects addresses the guiding principles and meeting city goals for transportation. We're starting this process early because it's brand new to staff in the city, but it also gives us time to further evaluate the project list with the Transportation Advisory Board. Next slide, please. So in 2023, we'll take on a hopefully smoother, but more typical process for CIP. So it'll likely start closer to March rather than in January. And in the future process, we'll carry over the previous Transportation Improvement Plan and make similar adjustments as we've done in the past, with the added layer in the staff evaluations to use the guiding principles as the evaluation criteria. This will help staff ensure our projects identify how well our projects meet with the transportation goals. Next slide, please. Following tonight's meeting, we'll be bringing the master plan policies to the Planning Policy Commission on September 10th. Assuming City Council approves the addition of the Mobility Master Plan to the comprehensive docket tonight, this will go to the public hearing in October, the study session in November, and be proposed as a comp plan in December. In October, we'll follow Transportation Review Board plan and start discussion towards 2021 work plan. Next slide, please. To conclude my presentation, I'd like to recognize that other staff that have supported the development of the master plan. Up until now, I've praised the work of the Transportation Advisory Board as they contributed to the development of the master plan, and have not really spoken individually to the staff that have supported the project, which has broadened the perspective for the mobility master plan. I also want to recognize the hard work of our consultant group of Fair and Peers for supporting staff through the plan's development. And Madam Mayor, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Stephen. We were starting to lose your feed a little bit at the end, so I think you timed that nicely, and it was good to have the city clerk work the slides for you. Before we go to questions, answers, comments, I'm going to go to Council President Hunt to see if there were any email comments that you would like to share with the council.
Thank you. Yes, this is Council President Hunt. We did receive 2 email comments on this. One, I'm sorry, I have an echo.
That's interesting. I'm not hearing the echo.
Okay. We had one email that was concerned about adhering to the GMA requirements. Adhering to the GMA requirements if this replaced the transportation chapter of the comprehensive plan, and then a email from a transportation advisory board member confirming that they did not discuss concurrency in any sort of meaningful way. And the first email reference also concerns about concurrency and how that was addressed in the plan. And that concludes the report. Could you hear the beginning of my comments?
Yes, but some others are shaking their head and saying no. So if you want to refresh a little bit on the beginning, that would probably be helpful.
Okay, great. So we received 2 comments on the master mobility plan. The first one was concerned about adhering to the GMA requirements, the Growth Management Act requirements. If this master mobility plan were to replace the transportation chapter of our comprehensive plan, and to make sure that we take that into account, the Growth Management Act requirements, and then also concern, in that same vein, concern about concurrency, which would be the requirements for building out the transportation system with growth and concurrently. And then a email from a Transportation Advisory Board member responding and building on that to reply that the Transportation Advisory Board had not discussed in a substantive way the concurrency issue. And that concludes the report or the correspondence that we received on this item. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. Before we go to council comments or questions, I'm not sure if it showed up in the information presented before or not, but the origin of this master mobility plan was the council goal, I believe, from 6 or 7 years ago. I believe Councilmember Goodman and former Councilmember Winterstein proposed that our city move in this direction, and here we are. Probably took a little longer than it ought to have, but here we are. So let's move on to comments and questions, and I will look in the chat box to see if any council members have any questions. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. I was just wondering, Stephen, if you could address the 2 questions or comments that Council President Hunt referred to that we received the public. One is about GMA compliance, and the other one about concurrency. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Goodman. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so in response to the email question about the Growth Management Act requirements, if you look at attachment E or Appendix E in the plan itself, Yeah, actually, or Appendix F, I apologize. There's a concurrency checklist, which is actually the Growth Management Act checklist that I went through with our consultant to make sure that we are actually abiding by all the requirements by the Growth Management Act and what's required for the transportation element in the comprehensive plan. So we're confident that we are actually meeting those requirements. In response to the second question on concurrency, the Transportation Advisory Board and staff did not spend the time on updating concurrency. That is actually a task that we're actually wanting to take on the next year, potentially looking at 2022 as a task to take on with the Transportation Advisory Board.
Thank you, Steve. And Councilmember Goodman, did that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. Can you explain with the scoring system that's applied to the projects, if the project's ranking in order, if that would be used, or if there's a tiered system where you go through a scoring process, but then you prioritize a section of projects? Because it seemed to me like the latter was the guidance that was in the Transportation Advisory Board meeting. And so I just wanted to clarify that and ask how that plan would be used and how the prioritized projects would be used.
Yes. Thank you for the question, Council President. The scoring system or the evaluation criteria is based on the guiding principles that are defined in the Mobility Master Plan. And we're using that to evaluate the projects on how best they're meeting those guiding principles. Not necessarily as a prioritization system saying the top 27 projects that show the most of the guiding principles are going to be the ones that those are going to happen in that order by the ranking. It's more of these are the projects that are really reflecting what the community wants out of our transportation system. So we're going to look at those first. But through the staff evaluations, through the CIP process, we're really going to be looking at what the funding opportunities are, what staff capacity are, and maybe projects that are lower than those top 27 might actually move up based on funding availability, staff capacity, or the ability to actually construct as part of another project to be able to complete those projects.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Walsh. I have two questions. Stephen, can you talk about the project list and scoring criteria and what the involvement will be with TAB, the Transportation Advisory Board, in doing that review? Is the project list and scoring criteria something that's going to happen internally with staff and then will be brought to council, or is TAB going to be involved in that process?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Walsh. The intention is through next year's CIP process is to actually walk through the entire project list with the advisory board, as well as the application of the evaluation criteria. So how each of those projects reflect the guiding principles, to first talk about, is the guiding principles, now that it's being used, reflecting what we want out of these projects, but also look from the other side of, well, now that we have these guiding principles, are these projects actually reflecting what the community wants out of our transportation system? And in future years, it won't take as long to go through the CIP process, but next year, since it's our first time, we're wanting to spend the time to have those conversations with the advisory board, so yes.
Great, and then, there we go. Thanks, Mayor. I have one more question. Can you talk about some of the kind of upcoming kind of post-adoption ideas that came out of this plan, primarily complete streets and the street standards, what the plan is for those, the timeline, and any impact that you see on this schedule or what's going to come out of it?
Yes, thank you. So the post-adoption, we are planning to make an update to our complete streets policy, which is something that has actually been part of a parallel process with staff with the same consultant, Fair and Peers, to help us better define what complete streets actually looks like for Issaquah, but also how we can better apply the Complete Streets policy to meet other city goals, that being health and equity, access, and being able to build out a system that's usable but also comfortable for community members. And that's going to be a policy. That's going to be actually one of the first policies we'll bring back to the City Council post-adoption. With the street standards, it's going to be likely a multi-phase approach where as soon as we get a public works director, there's some very outdated street standards we need to update right away. And then after we have a public works director, and as we have these discussions with the Transportation Advisory Board about the policies, the Complete Streets policies, the crossing guidelines, as well as traffic calming, we'll have further updates to bring to City Council or to discuss with City Council on approaches we want to make with the street standard updates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. Before we go to comments, are there any other questions? I will wait a few seconds to see if anything shows up in the chat box, and then we'll just move on to comments. Okay, let's start with Council President Hunt and a comment.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I think that it would be helpful to have a section near the prioritized project list explaining how the plan and how that list will be used and how it fits into our other processes. Both in your explanation just now as well as in the TAB meeting explanation, I think there's more nuance there as far as these are projects that have risen to the top because they score highly in these goal areas that we're prioritizing through this plan. But then there are so many other considerations that will come up in a given year as we actually go to implement individual projects. And so I think that explaining that and explaining how this prioritization process and that system fits into our other processes in the plan would be really helpful, because as we go to implement this, I think that's critical. So if that section could be added, I think it would be useful. Thanks.
Comment from Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Walsh. Stephen, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the reorganization and clarity that comes from this document compared to what we saw before. I think it is readable, it is clear, it conveys the message, and it really displays the work that the Transportation Advisory Board and you and other staff members have done over the last year. It made it a lot easier to see the direction that this was going with things. That being said, I do still have some concerns about the scoring criteria and the projects that that's going to raise up. But I see that there is of the projects that have come out of that, there is a variation, a variety of different types of projects. And so knowing that TAB is going to do a full review of this and that this is going to be in the light of day, I am willing to let the scoring criteria lie and see how everything falls out. And I guess I'm glad that there's a scoring criteria in the first place, and that gives us a chance to take a look at our projects and how we want to approach transportation as a community. So I will be watching, and we will see how it goes. But overall, just wanted to say good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. One thing I think I want to make sure, just to add on to Stephen's comments, is the ultimate decider any year of which capital projects are done is the council. You do that in your budget. So the scoring criteria will get us to a certain point, but the ultimate decision always will lie with you as a body. It looks like Councilmember Goodman has a comment.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. It's just a very general comment, and that is this has been a long time coming, as the mayor mentioned earlier, and the extraordinary amount of work that went into this can't be understated, and the number of people, including staff and TAB. So I am excited that we are at this point, realizing that nothing is ever perfect, but I am excited to move this to the next level and work on this, next year with implementation. And I realize it's got a little bit more process this year, but I just think it's really exciting. This, transportation issues have been our number one for 25 years. And so I'm just glad that we now have a guiding document. So thank you very much for everybody who was involved.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. At this time, I am not seeing anyone else in the chat box, and I did want to let the community know that there is no formal council action being requested at tonight's meeting. The Mobility Master Plan will next be reviewed by the Planning Policy Commission as part of the 2020 Comprehensive Plan Update process. And Stephen, I want to thank you and your team. Thank you for listing them out. It's good to show the community all of those different staff departments that had input in your team. So thank you for that cross-departmental thank you. That was really nice. And also just for the public watching, the TAB, the Transportation Advisory Board, in case folks don't know, it's citizens, it's residents. It's residents of Issaquah, like, everybody watching here. It's a great combination of community work and staff work together. It's a 2-year process. Thank you for everything you've done. Look forward to the next time it comes back to council. So thank you, and thank your team. The next item of business tonight is the consent calendar, and the consent calendar was distributed to council in advance. And if authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be considered together and approved by one motion. Have the payables and payrolls been reviewed?
This is Chris Ray. They have.
Sorry. I heard Councilmember DeMichelle and Deputy Council President Ray. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Sorry, I'm going to go back to the chat for a minute. I see that Council President Hunt, I skipped over whether or not she had any comments to summarize on this item. Sorry, Council President Hunt. Email comments on the Mobility Master Plan?
Madam Mayor, we had some comments on consent items, if there's opportunity to summarize those.
Okay, yes, please.
Okay, this is Council President Hunt. We received a number of emails regarding 2 consent items. So the first item that we received emails correspondence on was the Newport Way landslide stabilization project. This is AB 8025. And we received 8 emails on this topic with concerns about the need for a community review, the need for environmental review of this project, and also concern about the plan for trees and planting, if there was the need to remove trees or planting in that area, and then also concern about coordinating with the building of a trail, which is in the surrounding area, plans for being in the surrounding area. Also concern about coordination and relationship with other work and construction that's going on in this area, which again is around Newport Way. And then we also received an email on a separate topic, which was AB 8010, the 2021 school impact fee update. And this was a correspondence from a resident that was opposed or asked us rather to postpone this impact fee update until after the worst impacts of COVID were over. And that concludes the summary of correspondence. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. I did not see any council member raising their hands to remove anything from the consent calendar. So is there somebody to make a motion? Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I move to adopt the consent calendar as it appears in this evening's agenda.
That is great. Deputy Council President Ray.
This is Chris Ray. I second the motion.
So it has been moved and seconded, and we'll go to the clerk for a roll call vote.
First, we have Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
Councilmember DeMichelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt,
Aye.
Councilmember Marks,
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. The next item of business is regular business, but we do not have any scheduled items for this evening, so we'll move to good of the order. If someone has anything for good of the order, could you please indicate in the chat box and I'll call upon you. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I do have one thing that I would like to bring to Council's attention, and I'd like to bring it to Council's attention because it's something that will be added to our September 15th study session agenda, which is coming right up, and I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that we were going to be adding this item. So earlier today, I had a conversation with the school, Issaquah School District Board President, Marnie Maraldo, and we had a very good conversation. They are approaching the point where they will put in a project application for the Providence, the schools that will be built on the site of the former Providence Heights College. And so we discussed a little bit about where that is in the process. There was a Development Commission community conference recently on that topic, and Council has not discussed this topic in many months, I think since the beginning of 2020. So we will put that topic on the calendar for September 15th so that Council can discuss, because once that project application does go, is applied to the city, then it becomes quasi-judicial, and Council will be much more limited in what we can and can't discuss, especially what we can't discuss with the community. So wanted to let you know that that will be on the September 15th discussion, or September 15th calendar for discussion for Council, and we can have an opportunity to review the past discussions and update on the plan that was presented at that community conference as well.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. I am looking and do not see anything in the chat box on additional good of the order. So I will give it a few seconds before we move to the next item. The next item on our agenda this evening is upcoming council meetings, and the following upcoming meetings will be held virtually. The City Council study session that the Council President just referenced, Tuesday, September 15th. Potential agenda items include the item on Providence Heights property that the Council President just mentioned, housing stability, a local defense against evictions, 2021 budget calendar, and a second performance measurement workshop. The City Council regular meeting is on Monday, September 21st, and the potential agenda items for that include the public hearing on the 6-year Transportation Improvement Program and Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act funding allocation. And there is no executive session this evening, so we are now moving to adjournment. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned at 8:05. Thank you all. Have a good night.